Hello, you guys. My name is Alicia, and this is my podcast, Platicando con Alicia 23. So, my goal for this podcast is for you guys to listen in and just relate, know that you're not alone and we're all in this together. Some of these topics we're going to be talking about are some of them are sensitive to others, maybe not so much. Some of them are going to be more serious than others. Um, but in this episode, I have someone very, very special with me, and we're going to be talking about something, maybe it's a insensitive topic to others. I have Vivian, and we're going to be talking about the 5 stages of grief. Coming into this episode, I'm coming in blindfolded because I don't know anything about this, but I'm sure you are going to teach me. um, I brought some tissues because I know maybe I'm going to be crying, but that's okay. That's my thing. I cry. Um, But yeah, so I have Vivian with me. Go ahead and take over who you are, where you're from, how we met each other.
Yeah, so I am Vivian. I am from West Jordan, Utah. I grew up in Midville till I was about 13, and then I moved over to West Jordan. And then, through my adult life, I've moved in like different cities, but I've been in West Jordan for a good time now, probably about 5 years. Um, and that's where I plan to stay, most likely in these areas. If not, I'll be moving out of state one day. And I have 2 kids or 3 kids now. My little Luna has been added. I have a 14-year-old, a 9-year-old, and Luna is 1. And I have my husband, and so I am just a stay-at-home mom right now. I am going to school full time. I also am working on myself and also creating sacred spaces for other women to come in and heal. Uh, and we met in middle school, I believe, or elementary. Was it middle or elementary?
Um, did you go to Midville
Yeah,
Elementary?
I went to Midvale Elementary up until 6th grade. So I'm sure like we crossed paths
Mhm.
there.
But I was a super shy kid.
Oh, and
Yeah.
I was probably like, I don't know. I had like friends, but it was like select, like one or two. It wasn't like I had a big group, if that makes sense. I
Hmm.
feel like, but yeah, I think I remember you like in middle school, and then I think where we really connected was in our adulthood. Like you and I were pregnant at the same time,
Hmm.
and you like reached out to me. We talked then, and then just since then, I think I just been watching you like on social media and like grow your platform.
Um, I told Aldo that when we met each other again after all these years, I was like, I don't know if I should give her a hug or not, because middle school Vivian, I would never go up to her and give her a hug.
Girl, I was wounded. I'm just gonna be honest. I carried a lot of wounds then, and those are the wounds that I'm understanding now. And if I've ever hurt anybody, like that's not who I am now. Like definitely not. I've learned to grow, understand where those wounds are coming from. So like I really genuinely sincerely apologize if I gave off that energy. But my heart isn't in that place. I've moved on since then, and I've been able to heal a lot of things to help me work on myself. But you can give me a hug anytime. I love hugs. I try to be as approachable as possible. Understanding where I came from and that I was in that place helped me realize that that's not who I wanted to be. Because growing up, everybody like, oh, you're so intimidating, or oh,
Hmm.
I thought you were mean, but you're not. And when I'd get to connect with another person, they're like, oh, you're not what I thought you were at all. And I always got that a lot. And I'm like, I don't want to be that person. I want to be very approachable.
Hmm.
And who taught me that was Miguel. Miguel, my husband, he's such a people person. So
Hmm.
like he walks into the party, saluda every single person there, and I'm over here behind like super shy. And literally it was mostly insecurities what I've discovered. It's insecurities. And um I was afraid to go up to people and say hi. So then it came off and portrayed as me being like a mean girl.
Yeah.
And so but he's taught me a lot, and like to not be afraid and like to be able to show up and like saludar a todos, or like he will like see somebody from middle school and he will talk to them like they're his best friend, and I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, like you know them? He's like, oh, I met them in like elementary school. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, you guys are like talking like you guys are compadres or
Yeah.
something. So he's taught me to grow in that aspect and see things differently. Also, my journey in life has taught me to see things differently. But yeah.
Yeah. And I was a super shy kid, so that puts part of me not saying hi to you in middle
Yeah.
school, not just because you look like a mean girl. And honestly, I couldn't say I didn't like you or hated you because I didn't know you as a kid, and I was super shy. I had like two friends, um, and one of them I still talk to, which she's my really good friend Jasmine, and another one we were like a group of three, and then another one I think she's your cousin,
Which one?
Magali.
Oh my golly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she was one of my best friends in middle school too, and then in high school I was just super shy, and the only people I could like be myself around with were my guy friends. So that was nice. And then topic comes up to maybe the topic we're gonna be talking about today. But I was really afraid to make friends because the people that I did feel comfortable with, and they were my super close friends. It ended up maybe I lost them, not just physically, but emotionally, or I don't know, like the people that I've been most comfortable with, I have lost. So that hurts me a lot, you
Yeah.
know, and that's why I'm so shy. And but I'm trying to change that because, like you said one time, everything we love we will lose. But I don't know if you want to start talking about the topic. I'm
Yeah.
ready to cry.
It's such an emotional topic, but it's something that's not talked about. And I think I'm really glad that you were able to have me here today to kind of spread awareness about this topic. It's something that I personally have gone through in a significant way. There's no specific way that grief looks. It looks different for everybody. So just because mine looks like this doesn't mean the next person next to me is going to look like that. And we have to be able to understand one another and be able to connect in those ways and be able to create space for one another to be able to kind of work with one another and be there for one another. Um, but um, so, with grief, um, let me tell you a little bit about my backstory first before I go into that. So, I started my healing journey 7 years ago. Like we always do the work throughout our life. We always gain these experiences, and with our experiences, we gain wisdom, right? And we know how to, when we go through the same experience later on in life, we know how to react differently based on our growth and what we learned from that experience. But sometimes it's hard to learn from the experiences when you're not conscious in those moments. So you can keep repeating that same cycle of what's going on. But for me, 7 years ago, I was working, going to school, and being a mom, and it started to become too much.
Yeah.
And I felt that I was doing that because I wanted to portray this image that I'm doing it all. Like,
Mhm.
I'm doing it all. Look at me. I'm perfect. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I realized that I wasn't happy. I was doing what society told me what I needed to
Mhm.
do and what I to be successful and to be happy. And I realized that I wasn't happy. I was doing all the things right and I still wasn't happy. And it wasn't necessarily like that there was all these problems around me. It was just inside. Like I wasn't happy inside,
Mhm.
And I have a good husband. I have a good support system with my siblings and like my family in general. Like they're very supportive. So I started diving deep, trying to understand like what's going on. Like what is it that I can do to change
Mhm.
myself, and what is it that I need to do to help like the people around me grow so that we can be happy. And that approach was very hard because I went into it like I'm going to rescue everybody. I'm going
Yeah.
to fix everybody because I was tired of everything, right? And so I started reading this book. It was called Father Therapy by Doreen Virtue. And it talked about like fatherhood wounds, like wounds from that you received as a child from your father, and like how to heal that and what you can do to heal that. And it ended up being like bring and for me, I thought I had wounds from my mom, like
Mhm.
because me and my mom always bumped heads growing up. And so I'm like, well, if I read this book, I'll be able to apply it and like transfer it into a relationship with my mom. Whatever it tells me to do, I'm going to do it with my mom, not my dad, right? So I'm like, okay. And this actually, I started reading this book probably um, November, December of 2017. And I was on the point where it like told me to write a letter to my dad and a letter to my mom. But as I was reading that book, I realized that the wound wasn't only with my mom, it was with my dad, like my childhood wound that I had. And so I started writing them letters, and um, at that time they were in Mexico. And I remember a conversation of me telling my husband, like, hey, like, I'm going to give these letters to my mom and dad when they get back from Mexico. And unfortunately, they never made it back. They passed away on their way home in a car accident. It was very tragic. The accident was caused by someone, and it was very hurtful. It was very hurtful. It was very traumatic. I experienced a loss so big to lose both of my parents at once. And I never expected to go through something that hurtful, but it led me to dive deeper into my healing. Um, but one thing that, I've since then, that was 5 years ago, I stepped into this healing journey. I started reading books, meditating, going to retreats, and thinking that this was going to fix me. And last year I had this realization that I was still feeling that burnt out, like that tiredness, unhappiness. And I realized that it was because I was denying a big part of me, denying a big part of me, which was grief. It was the grief of my childhood, the grief of my teenage years, the grief of losing my parents. I'm not no more. I was a workaholic. So I would use work, school, doing everything for everybody as a way to escape my reality. And when I had that realization that I was doing that as a way to not let go of what actually really happened, like I was using that to cover up my hurt. So I would go and distract myself and find everything to fill up my time so that I didn't have to face what was actually going on. And so when the pandemic happened, I was in a like I was working. I used work as a distraction. I was thriving in my career. I was moving up the ladder. I started my career in HR. Like I was really successful in my career, and I finally hit a roadblock in my career where I wasn't like feeling fulfilled anymore. And so I'm like, I'm hitting this point again. Like, what is going on? Like, and then I realized you're denying those parts of yourself because you're afraid. You don't want to. You don't want to look at that. You just want to keep acting like nothing's wrong. And that hurt me because people that are grieving, I want them to be able to grieve and be authentic and be really vulnerable with themselves. And I feel like I portrayed this image to the world that I was okay. Like, I receive a lot of compliments like, wow, you're handling this really well, or wow, look at you, like how can you go through that and like still be like functional, or how look at just all these things. And I'm like, you guys don't know what I'm feeling
Yeah.
inside. Like I'm dying inside right now. And I don't want people who are grieving to feel that they have to like use their hurt to thrive. Like just allow yourself that space to grieve. And so recently, at the beginning of this year, I read this book called um, The Gates of Grief. And The Gates of Grief is by a psychotherapist writer and so activist Frances Weller. And I was reading this book, and it brought so many things to awareness to me where I'm like, okay, there's so many different levels of grief. It doesn't look the same. And so, you know, it's not something that we ask for. It's not something that we're like, okay, I want to lose something or someone. It's just something that's part of life. We lose a loved one due to illness or due to a pandemic. There's different forms of grief. And as a society, we don't create that space for people to experience grief or to grieve. Um, and we don't acknowledge it. Like we just avoid it. Like it's a topic that we just avoid. We don't want to go there. We just want to avoid grief and whatever that looks like. Because why? Because it hurts. And I'm not going to shame other people. Yeah, I was afraid to go there because it's very painful. It's very painful. It brings you down to your knees where you feel like you're not going to be able to get back up ever again. And
Grieving. I thought grief was like some losing someone passing away, but I've learned that they don't have to pass away. I could grieve a relationship I had from elementary or my teen years. So yeah, I've learned there's different types of griefs also that I did not know.
Yeah, yeah, it's deeper than that. And like I said, as a society, it needs to be talked about more so that we can create those spaces for one another to be vulnerable and to say, hey, like, reach out to someone who's close to you or someone that you trust and be like, hey, like, I feel like I need to talk right now and my throat is itching to talk, but I'm afraid. And being able to have that support system to call someone or even with yourself, create that safety within yourself and be like, hey, it's okay to feel that. It's okay to go there. It's okay to to allow yourself that space to sit in it and not run from it.
Mhm.
And it's an emotion, and that emotion of grief creates a barrier that when we are able to remove that barrier, it allows us to open up our lives in so many different ways. Um, when we suppress our grief, we suppress joy. So it's like when we don't want to look at that darkness or that shadow, it doesn't allow us to receive the light and the joy in our lives. So then we start relying on simulation and stimulants to give us some sense of joy and experience an we neglect ourselves from experiencing an authentic life because we then become numb and then we start just doing things either because society tells us to or because someone else like our partners want us to live a certain way or because our friends want us to live a certain way and we don't really live our life the way that we want to live it. So we like numb ourselves to our actual authentic life that we could be living. And in our culture, we're conditioned to do everything ourselves. Like
Yes.
we're not taught to reach out. Like we're not taught to say, "Hey, I need help today," or "Hey, how are what I need this. I need this from you." That was really hard for me because growing up, I would do everything alone. Like I was a teen mom as well. So it's also ego. Like my ego didn't allow me, but my ego comes from conditioning of society. Plays a role in my ego where it's like I'm not gonna ask you for help. I'm not gonna. So when I was a teen mom, I carried a lot of shame from that becoming a teen mom. So I refused to ask anybody for help. My parents were very supportive and they would watch my son when I would go to work in school. But when if it was to like party, hang out with friends, they absolutely refused. So I didn't really wasn't really out there partying and drinking and doing all the teenage things, right? That society
Mhm.
makes us think that we need to be doing. And that's not the way that teenage years are supposed to. It's just what society portrays it to be. But um, I felt like I had to do it alone. So growing up, I was like, I never asked for help. And that showed up in my relationship now to where like I didn't know how to express to my husband what I needed.
Mhm.
It took me years of therapy and years of work to finally have the courage to express my needs to my siblings, to express my needs to my husband, and to be able to express my needs to my children. And what helped me realize that is like my son, he's 14, and I want to be able to understand him and what he's going through and being there for him. And how do I expect him to reach out to me and ask me for help if I don't know how to do that myself?
Yeah.
And I can't read his mind. So I want to be able to be that example for him to be like it's okay to ask for your needs. So for example, my daughter's really sick. She's been up all night and yesterday I had asked my husband like, "Hey, like I have this big day tomorrow. I'm going to be on a podcast. Like I need to prepare. Can you help me with the baby?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he stayed up all night with her. But I could have suffered in silence and been really overstimulated and had my anxiety kick in because I had to balance a sick baby and then coming into to preparing for this, and I spoke my needs. Before I didn't do that. I would just shut down and then I would build resentment towards whoever didn't help me.
Yeah.
And so so I've learned to do that, to express my needs. If you want support and help, that's the biggest thing, is expressing to people what your needs are. And you don't know them sometimes. Like I'm like, well, what do I want? Like how do I want people to show up for me? And I had to sit with myself and write down, how is it that my husband can show up for me? How is it that my siblings can show up for me? But honoring who they are at the same time without the expense of them sacrificing themselves. How can they help me but still show up and be themselves and not sacrifice themselves? So it's taken a lot to get there, but you can get there. You can get there.
And
So as mentioned before, we're forced to carry our sadness alone, our sorrow alone, because we're not taught to reach out for support. And we also are pressured to return to normal so soon. Like Oh, you a loved one passed away. Okay, well you should be over that. Or oh, you lost someone in your life. Oh, you should be over that, whether they're here on earth or not. Oh, you lost your job. You should be over that. Go find another one. Oh, you lost a part of yourself. You should heal yourself and you should be over it right away. That's not the way it works. You have to create time and space for yourself to be able to heal. And it's not like one day you wake up and you're healed. It takes you to do the work and for you to set those boundaries and for you to hold yourself accountable and others to be able to create that space for you and the space for yourself. And it's not get over it or get on with it. As we come together with grief and recognize that it's something that we all share, we can all relate to that emotion one way or another. We're not alone. We've all been lost in our journeys of life, and it's okay to feel our pain once in a while and come back from it. And if you feel like you're in it, learn how to reach out for help when you're in it, whether that be through a therapist or reaching out to your spouse or reaching out to a friend and be like, hey, like this is going on in my life. I need help working through this. Can you help me? Can you support me in this? And they will show up for you. That's your tribe. That's who you've created. And
Back to the topic about us reaching for help. It's even about the littlest things where like I'm at home washing dishes, but my husband's in the couch and I'm like slamming the dishes cuz I need help, but I don't tell him like, "Hey, come help me." And sometimes us as mothers or wives we're like, "Well, I'm not supposed to tell you. You're just supposed to do it." But sometimes we do have to tell them, and I think we all have to work on just reaching out for help. As minimal as the help can be, it's, I know in my case, it has helped me a lot from transitioning into a single mother and now having my husband, and he's just like so supportive with my kids, with me, and everything. And I know that makes me a better person because I'm getting his help. So it's not just all on me, like you said.
yeah, definitely. I resonate with that so much because I've been in that place too where it's like I've been doing things and then my husband will be doing something else completely and I'm like and then I would begin to resent him. And
Yeah.
I'm like, girl, you're not speaking up. Like how is he supposed to read your mind? And that took me a lot to overcome to be able to realize like he cannot read your mind. He doesn't know that you need help. He thinks you're just doing your thing. And
You love it.
yeah, yeah, right. And it's also a belief as society conditioned that the woman does everything and the man just gets to do whatever. But I'm so glad that my husband's not that way. He doesn't have that machista way of living. And but also it's our responsibility to take accountability to be like, well, I need to speak up. And at that point, if you're speaking up and your spouse is not responding to what your needs are, then that's a whole different story. But at least taking the step to speak up and saying, hey, I need this. This is my needs. And then hearing their needs too. What are their needs from you? Then you're able to create that like energy to vibrate off of one another and create that flow in your household. So I've been there definitely. And it took me a while to be like, well, this is what I need from you because I didn't even know what I needed from him sometimes. I just know I needed help, but I didn't know what help.
With what?
What did
Yeah.
I need? Yeah, I was part of like being overstimulated and not understanding. And a lot of it sometimes, like, I feel like was stuff that was going on with me that had nothing to do with my husband, but I had to realize like I'm projecting onto him. This
Yeah.
is not about him. This is about me and how I'm feeling inside, and I'm projecting onto him. We always hurt the ones we love the most, unfortunately. It's the reality. And as long as we're able to recognize it and take accountability and have those deep, vulnerable conversations with one another, that's what helps you move forward and like move past that and heal and create an understanding with one another. I feel that's my experience, but yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like, um, let's say someone is a machista, and well, I thought my husband was a machista, but then I met him, and I feel like communicating um made everything work, and that's why we're almost going on 8 years, because since the beginning I told him what I needed, and just communicated, because I could have gone into the relationship all in love and be like, okay, I'm gonna do everything he wants me to do so this could be a happy house. But then that was gonna end up me doing everything and draining myself and being angry um and I'm not gonna say I'm the perfect wife or mother, but I see that with the help of both of us, it's a happy home because there's been times where it's just been me with the kid sick and maybe he's at work because he needs to work, of course. Um, and I get frustrated with my kids and my husband, and it's nobody's fault. So I have been working on that, and I just feel like it's made my house so much happy. Just telling him and him telling me what we both need to make it a happy house and have happy kids in the house. So yeah.
Yeah, communication is very strong, and vulnerability, like speaking the truth, right? We can always come go into a conversation and be like sugarcoat it and say
Mhm.
this is what's going on, but in reality that's not really what's going on. But being honest with your partner, it brings you a long way, and you find that balance in your home. You know, like your family and your space, your home, that's what you created with your partner. And you're responsible for that energy that's going to keep going in and out. And if you feel like there's a cycle or some type of repetitive pattern that keeps showing up, it's important to figure out why, get to the root cause of why that's happening, and then being able to have that conversation or remove somebody from your life, like from your like immediate circle, to be able to go back into flow again. And
Mhm.
that's what life teaches you is like things come up, let's work through them together. We obviously love each other, we want to be together, let's figure this out together. Like a marriage isn't perfect, I'm not perfect, my husband's not perfect, and being able to learn from our like learn from those difficult times, it literally strengthens your relationship so much. It really does. And so I can resonate with that too.
Yeah. With Aldo, this was my first time living with a partner, so it was really hard for me because we didn't have the time to even date. It was really quick. We met each other. We talked for about a month, and then he moved in with me. And he didn't know me. I didn't know him, so it was hard. The first year, it was super hard because I didn't trust him, so I didn't know how to be vulnerable and talk to him on what I needed or not. But then we started getting to know each other, of course, because we were now married, is how we call it in the Hispanic. Because when you live with them, you're
Yeah.
their wife. Um, but yeah, it probably being going into the relationship for the first year was super hard. But everything, I feel like everything that you fight for and you put so much passion to it, at the end of the day, it's like, see, that's what you get for working hard. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely resonate with that. Like, you know, me and Miguel had a past, right? We were like little childhood, middle school sweethearts. And I feel like that relationship, like he created such a safe place for me at that moment in my life that I held on to that. Like
Mhm.
when we like went our different ways and like he went on his path and I went on my path in teenage years, like I held on to that. He still would call and check on me to like throughout the years would always check on me how I'm doing and would always let me vent to him and like he was very supportive then, but he always was respectful.
Mhm.
And you know, in our teen when we reunited again later on when we were 19, we had gone through a journey in our teenage years. I had had a family, had a baby. He went on his journey, and I when we came back together again, like I wanted the Miguel from the love we had before, right? Like the relationship we had before. One, we were not the same age. We were not 14 years
Yeah.
old. We were 19. He had gone through his experiences. I had gone through my experiences, and we then created a relationship, but we did move on. We did move in like together,
Mhm.
like moved on, like moved our relationship fast as well. And we had to learn who each other was again because we weren't that same person, but also we had experiences from our past that were affecting us. And so we had challenges that showed up, you know. His childhood, his teenage years, my childhood, my teenage years really showed up in our relationship. But as I started doing the work and realizing that couples and relationships or that person you're attracted to you're either going to trigger each other's wounds over and over again, or you're going to come together and be like, and heal each other's wounds.
Mhm.
So we chose to heal our wounds. We chose to create space for one another to help heal our wounds instead of triggering them to where it's like, yeah, that person's in your life to teach you something. And especially with marriage, like, are you going to let something small break you apart? Or are you going to sit there with your spouse and let them express themselves and talk to you from a year, going to just understand them and create that space for them so they can heal and trust you and create that deeper level of relationship? So I've been there similar pace, like a similar place before where I felt like we moved on so fast, but then we also at this place where like we're going on 12 years together, and I feel like we have grown so much together, and it's so rewarding as well because when you look back, like I'm sure you look back and you're like, wow, we've come a long way, and it just brings this joy in your heart because you're
Yes.
like, look where we're at now. Like it makes you so happy because those moments that were hard are so rewarding at the same time because it's brought you to this place where you're at now.
Hmm. But I feel like it's a two-way thing because imagine me like asking for what I needed and talking to him, but I wouldn't get that back. Then and some people are like, "Oh, you didn't fight for your relationship." There's so much you could do. Like if you're just fighting and they're not fighting back for the relationship, then I think that's just hurting you, and you should move on. But if they are fighting, if you guys are both fighting for a happy home, then yeah, you sometimes I go to bed and I'm like, I remember when it was that year and it was so hard and we were at my apartment and now like we have kids together, a house and everything. And in my mind I always go to sleep saying like this is not it. Like there's more coming and it's going to be better and I'm so happy.
That's so beautiful. It's so
Yes.
beautiful to look back on. And yeah, boundaries are very important in a relationship. Like if you are expressing your needs and you're setting these boundaries, like, hey, this is what I need. I don't like when you do this. This is how it makes me feel. And then they are able to come and be like, okay, well, they can either respond and like soak in what you just told them, or they can react based off of their wounds that they have and completely go the opposite way. So I believe in fighting for your marriage to a certain extent. Like there's women out there who are in difficult situations. And I've been there. I've been in difficult situations where I've had to remove myself from them. And it's not easy. So when I see women like empower themselves to move on, not necessarily like moving on in different ways. Like they either leave the relationship or they grow within the relationship,
Hmm.
right? And if you grow within the relationship and your spouse is like, wow, she's growing and they support that, that's beautiful. But if your spouse does not create a supportive environment, it's really hard for that woman
To grow.
to grow. And so I also want to acknowledge that as well. Like your space and your surrounding and who's around you is really important. And if you don't have that space, it takes you have to look at that dark side of it and be like, is this what I really want? You know? And so it's life is a journey definitely,
Yes.
but that's why we need like a support system. It's very important to have a support system, to have a village to show up for us and when we want to talk about those hard things. And we're able to hold space for one another and witness one another. Like even right here in this moment, like you're sharing your stories with me, I'm sharing my stories with you, and I relate to you so much. Like I relate to you in so many ways, and we are mirrors. We mirror off one another. We're able to relate to the emotions that come with our experiences, and that's all it takes is for us to sit down to be vulnerable with one another, and that's how you start creating your support system. And I'm a firm believer is you attract who you are. If you're a good person, you're going to attract good people. If you're not a good person, you're going to attract that energy into your life. And so it's very important for you to be conscious and aware of who you are so that you attract that into your life and you create those people within your tribe to be able to show up for you. And there was moments where I'm like, I would hear that and I'm like, yeah, whatever. Like, um, that, like, nobody wants to support me. Nobody's here for me. I feel so alone.
Hmm.
But then I realized I was pushing people away.
Yeah.
So I'm like, girl, you're doing this to yourself. Like, you are literally doing this to yourself. don't push people away. If people want to be there for you, let them be there for you. Don't push them away based because of your ego or you weren't taught to have help. But allow people to show up for you. And as you do the work, more beautiful people start showing up in your life, and you create your tribe that way. Like I literally have wrote down on a piece of paper who I want to surround myself, like what they look like, what we're doing, what they do on their free time, what does their family look like, and I attract that into my life because that's what I want. I want a healthy relationship, healthy friendships, and I do have healthy friendships. Like I have good people in my life that taught me healthy friendships to where, like, I can be vulnerable and be like, hey, I can't afford to go out this weekend. Can we do it another time? And they're like, yeah. And other friendships that I had in the past, I felt like, oh, they're gonna think I'm poor or they think I can't, you know.
Mhm.
But I'm vulnerable, and I create this space with other people where I'm like, I can be vulnerable with them. I can tell them I'm going through a really hard time right now. I cannot hang out this weekend. Can we hang out a different weekend? And I have those people who are understanding, and they don't like, oh, you're lame, or oh,
Mhm.
you don't want to go party. And I'm like, I'm not I haven't partied for a long time, for many years. I stopped drinking when my parents passed away. It was also a fear of mine because I was afraid to get lost in the alcohol because my family background, come from alcoholism, and a lot of people have died in my family because of that, and I was afraid that I was going to go down that, so I stopped drinking. And but I became a workaholic, so
Mhm.
it's not like, oh, I didn't drink. Oh, and then also with food, like my relationship with food has been rough. I'm still learning about it, still learning how to provide nutrients to my body that are going to help me. But like I said, like we find these ways, these simulations or these stimulants to fill that void in within us, whether it's alcohol, whether it's working, whether it's doing drugs or watching TV. Like we find a way to escape our reality in life. And when we get together and we have that tribe and we have that circle, or the people that we can go to, our husbands, and if you feel like you don't have that, one thing that really helped me was therapy. Like I started therapy. I've been going to therapy for several years, but last year of going every single week and seeing my therapist every single week, has really shifted my life around as well. I felt that I was alone. I felt that I didn't have nobody. So having that therapist there, helping me understand who I really am and helping me, and it's not like she's like, this is who you are. She helped me talk through it.
Mhm.
Talking through it really creates that for you to even hear yourself what you're speaking, and then it helps you understand who you are and what you want. And be able to go to therapy helped me understand who I am, what I want, what I really have in my life already to be grateful for. It wasn't just, oh, this is what's going on. I mean, there was a lot of that.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, I don't know how to get through this. But there was also, wow, I really have a beautiful life and I should step into gratitude and like honor my husband, honor my children, honor my siblings, honor my friends for who they are. I have women in my life who have been so supportive, that have empowered me in so many ways, and I literally, it brings, like, I want to cry because I never thought that I would have that ever. Like I never, especially losing my parents, like I lost such a big foundation in my life, but to have these people show up in my life and be like, hey, I'm here for you, and really show me that and help me feel it and believe. And like there was points where I felt I wasn't worth to have that love. Like those, when they would show up in my life, I'm like, how do I handle this? Like how do I respond to having people show up for me? And then I'd be like, I'm not good enough, and I would just shut down. So I'd be like, no, you are worthy enough. This is the life you've created, and they're in your life for a reason because they love you too, just like you
So
love
being
them.
able to have those women in my life to like hold space and understand that I don't need to be fixed. Nothing needs to be fixing, or nothing needs to be fixed, or there doesn't need to be any fixing in my life, to just hear me, to just listen to me, to just hear me out. This is what I'm going through. I don't need you to give me your advice or your opinion or what you feel I should do unless I ask for it.
Mhm.
Like if you come to me and you're like, hey, I have this going on, I'm going to create a space for you to talk to yourself, for you to talk to me, but also listen to yourself of what's going on. And sometimes we just need to talk our hurt, our sorrows, and once we listen to ourselves, we have our own wisdom. Like we're so strong, or like we're so resilient that we have our own wisdom and we know what we need to do. Sometimes we just need a reminder within ourselves. And by having somebody there just listening and witnessing you experience that moment is all you need. Sometimes you need somebody to, give you advice or give you feedback or help you, but ask for it. Ask for it. And when when I knew you were the person for this podcast, cuz I'm like Vivian, maybe we're not so close, but I feel like this is going to be the beginning of a good friendship. I feel like you give off that vibe and I feel it where like maybe one day I do need to call you and tell you what I'm feeling. I know you're going to be the person to not be like telling people, or you're just going to listen to me. And like you said, if I'm not asking for your advice, I know you're not going to give me your advice. You're just going to listen to me, and I feel that vibe from you, and I love it. I love this for you. You're thriving. Keep doing what you're doing because we're both going to be thriving.
Thank you. It's I'm glad that you can get you get that energy off of me. It's something that I worked for so long, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. Um, I want to turn my hurt into something beautiful. Like hurt people. And I don't want to be that hurt person hurting people. I want to be that person who's resilient and be able to overcome challenges in her life to show up for other people. And I'm glad that you get that from me. Um, I am glad that you're able to feel that comfortable and know that I am a call away, a text away, a voice recording away to just say, "Hey, can you hold space for me?" It just can you hold space for me? And that's just as simple as that. Sometimes it's hard because you don't want to. Oh, I don't want to burden that person with my problems. You're not burdening someone with their problems if you're just like, hey, can you create space for me? Or hey, I need some space. Or hey, can I talk to you? I have something going on I need help working through, or something, or even if you create a code word with somebody, like say you're in such this, you're in a place where you're like, I don't even think I have the motivation to even text someone that, just create a code word. Like for me, if I text you a broken heart just by itself, know that I need somebody in that moment, even if it's a little emoji or something that's going to be like, it's a code word between you and that person to know, hey, yeah, she's really going through it because she doesn't even have the energy to even text, hey, I need help,
Mhm.
even that moment. And your friends start realizing, like, for me, my friends started realizing, like, oh, she's um closing off. And they'll be like, hey, they'll reach out, hey, are you okay? Like, they know who I am in my light, but they also know who I am in my shadow when I am pushing them away. And that's where we've been able to be vulnerable, to be able to recognize that in one another. Like when we're in those moments, like something's going on, I'm going to reach out to that person. Are they okay? And to be able to have those relationships is very beautiful. And, grief and love are like sisters from the very beginning. You have to experience love in order to experience grief. And grief is a reminder of the love that you once had. So they are aligned in one with one another. And we live in a society that rejects and denies grief. Like we're not like in a society that's accepting.
Mhm.
And so when we're going through things, it's really hard to reach out. So I want to like really emphasize on that I know it's hard to reach out. It's not just something that you learn overnight. It's having that courage and that vulnerability to say, "Hey, I need help." It's a hard step to move forward. And a lot of things, grief has been like colonized by the pharmaceuticals, where they'll be like, here's a medicine to fix you. And grief is not a problem that needs to be solved. It's not a puzzle. It's not a, something that someone's going to come and fix for you. It is not a condition that needs to be medicated. It is an encounter within our human experience. Like it's something part of our human experience that we're going to go through. And it is an intense emotion. It's really hard. It's intense, but it's a skill. It's a skill that we develop throughout our life to know that when we experience grief, it doesn't need to take over our life. Like we can overcome it, not numb it, overcome it and go through it and allow ourselves to feel it. And it takes courage to have the courage to experience that loss or to feel that feeling. And we need to work on as a society is to come together and honor grief, whatever that looks like, and creating a space in our life to fulfill our souls, and welcoming grief and allow seeing it from a different perspective and honoring it in a way that it's pushing us to step into our most authentic life and whatever that is and whatever our heart desires. And Grief enters our hearts in many ways. Like it tends to our grief. A, a way to tend to our grief is acknowledging that it's there. Like acknowledging that our grief is there and that our heart is hurt. And each, there are, we're going to kind of go talk about the five gates of grief. We're going to step into that. But each gate of grief helps us understand ourselves in so many ways. And the loss that we've experienced, whether that is losing somebody, losing a career, losing your a part of ourselves, by being able to understand that and honor that and realize that it touches our hearts and our souls at the end of the day, and it pushes us to become a better version of ourselves as we create space for it and learn from it and honor it and feel it. And so the first gate is understanding that everything we love, we are going to lose. Um, that's very hard. It's
Yes.
very hard because when we acknowledge grief, we acknowledge at some point we're going to lose what we love, whether that be your partner, whether that be your mom, your dad, your child. It is realizing that. And it touches us all in so many forms. It touches us in, marriage, suicide, brings us together, and our broken hearts lead us to a wider sense of identity. It helps us understand ourselves on a deeper level, and it opens us up to see the barriers that are in our lives that are now that are segregating us from the world. And death rattles our streets daily. Like it is, as I mentioned before, it extends as far beyond like our own grief. It's in the cities, it's in our trees, it's in our destroyed mountains, in our oceans, and war, weapons, chemicals, and so on. And so that daily loss that we feel, we consciously recognize that it's that we're registering grief even though we don't know it, and we have to take that into consideration as well. And this takes us into the fourth gate of grief, which is what we expected and did not receive. So these are expectations that we've set in our lives, um, that were never fulfilled. So this sorrow and this hurt is, it calls forward things that we may not even realize that we lost. And as we pass through our childhood, teenage, and adulthood years, we set these expectations for ourselves, and sometimes they don't happen, and sometimes we don't realize that we've set that expectation for ourselves, and we feel that sadness, we feel that loss once